Before we get into anything, I want you to hear me loud and clear because this is the part nobody ever tells you. You think that when you finally give up on an avoidant, when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to fix everything, that they're just going to walk away unfazed. You think they won't notice. You think that they won't care. You convince yourself that your silence means nothing to them because, for so long, they acted like your presence meant nothing too. But here's the truth you've never been told. The moment an avoidant realizes you've truly given up, not pretending, not playing games, not posting quotes on your story to get a reaction, but the moment they feel that energetic shift, something primal activates inside them. Something they've been suppressing for months, maybe years, and their reaction is nothing like what you expect. In this video, we are going to solve the biggest problem people face with avoidance. Why do they pull away when you care, but come closer the moment you stop trying? Why does your effort push them away, and your absence wake them up? Why does letting go trigger the reaction you wanted all along? And most importantly, what actually happens inside an avoidance mind step by step when they realize you've stopped fighting for the connection? This is the video that's going to explain everything you were never able to understand about their behavior, their feelings, and their shocking reaction when they feel you slip through their fingers. When an avoidant finally realizes you've given up, the first thing that happens is internal panic. And I need you to understand this. They will deny it with every fiber of their being. They won't show it on their face. They won't say it out loud. They won't message you suddenly with a confession. But inside their nervous system, it is absolute chaos. And this moment is so important to understand because most people assume that avoidants don't care, that they walk away easily, that your absence means nothing, that letting you go feels like relief to them. No. That is the story they tell themselves, but it is not the reality of their internal world. What actually happens is something far deeper, far more human, and far more emotional than anything they ever let you see. For avoidance, the belief that you will always be there is the foundation of their ability to stay distant. Their entire emotional strategy depends on one single assumption. You won't leave, you won't walk away, you won't give up. They think you'll always be available, always waiting, always ready to reconnect whenever they finally feel comfortable. You are their emotional safety net, a cushion they don't appreciate until it's gone. And when they sense that the energy has shifted, when they feel that you are not just stepping back as a tactic, but actually letting go as a choice, their inner world cracks open. Here is the truth. Avoidants don't fear intimacy the way people think. They fear losing control. They fear being exposed. They fear being the vulnerable one. But the one fear that sits deeper than all of that, the fear they never talk about, the fear they deny even to themselves, is the fear of abandonment. They push people away as protection to avoid being abandoned first. But the paradox is that they desperately want connection. They just don't know how to tolerate it. So, what happens when they suddenly feel the absence of the person who made them feel the safest? They don't react with calm. They react with shock. You'll see it in the way they check your social media more than usual, even if they don't interact. You'll feel it in their energy. You might notice it in the tone of their messages, which might suddenly become shorter, slower, or oddly careful. They'll start paying attention in a way they never did before because something in them wakes up. It's that jolt of realization. Wait, this person might actually be done with me. And that thought flips their internal system upside down. Avoidants are comfortable when they believe you are chasing, when they feel you're emotionally invested, when they sense they have room to push and pull, they feel safe. But when they feel the string has been cut, it's a shock to their nervous system. They've lost their buffer. They've lost the person who gave them emotional stability without asking for too much. They've lost something they assumed would always be there, and that realization hits them like cold water thrown in their face. And here's where things get fascinating. Avoidants don't respond logically to this shock. They don't think, maybe I should reach out. They don't think, I should talk about my feelings. They don't think, this is my moment to step up. No, instead, they start analyzing everything. They overthink. They spiral. They study your behavior like a detective. They replay the last conversations in their head. They start wondering what shifted, They wonder if they said something wrong. They wonder if they misread your energy. They panic because they don't know how to fix it without sacrificing their emotional boundaries. And yet, they don't want to lose you either. Their first reaction is always internal conflict. It's the tug-of-war between their need for independence and their desire for connection. And giving up on them quietly forces them to confront that tension head-on. They suddenly have to deal with the consequences of their distancing. They have to feel the emptiness they created. And it shocks them every single time, because avoidants convince themselves they're fine on their own. They tell themselves they don't need anyone. They rely on solitude as their comfort zone. But when someone who mattered pulls away, they feel the loss intensely, even if they refuse to show it. You may notice them becoming strangely curious about you. They'll ask subtle questions, but in a roundabout way, they'll bring up a memory, but casually. They'll fish for information without making it obvious. They are trying to understand your emotional temperature. They want to know if you're really done or if this is temporary. And they don't know how to ask directly, because directness feels like vulnerability to them. This is where many people get confused. They think avoidants don't care, because avoidants don't chase. But avoidants don't chase not because they feel nothing, but because chasing requires emotional exposure. For them, reaching out feels like standing in a storm without shelter. But the shock of losing you, that storm hits them anyway. They can't outrun it. They can't hide from it. Your absence starts occupying space in their mind that your presence never did, because now there is a threat. Now there is loss. Now the connection they thought they controlled is slipping away. And this shock is not just emotional, it's physiological. Avoidants regulate their emotions through distance. That is their coping mechanism. But when you remove yourself from the equation, they lose their emotional regulation anchor. They feel the anxiety they've been pushing away. They feel the need they've been suppressing. They feel the attachment they've been denying. And because they don't usually allow themselves to feel these things, the intensity hits them harder than it hits anyone else. They may pull back at first. Not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed. Then they may reappear, not fully, but in small ways, little pings, small signs of life. They might like your post. They might reply to something insignificant. They might send a neutral message, but with a timing that feels strange. These aren't accidents. These are avoidant survival strategies. Because now the fear of losing you is louder than the fear of closeness. Now they're trying to reestablish connection without admitting they want it. Now they're trying to pull you back in without revealing their emotional hand. This moment when they realize you're letting go is actually the first time the avoidant feels what you've been feeling all along. The uncertainty, the insecurity, the fear of losing someone, the longing, the confusion. They finally experience the emotional consequences of distance, and that shock wakes them up. It forces them to see their own patterns, even if only for a second. And that moment of awareness becomes the first crack in their emotional armor, because when the avoidant feels the possibility of losing you, their attachment system activates. Their mind becomes flooded with thoughts of you. Their memories of you grow sharper. Their longing becomes stronger. Their need to feel connected outweighs their need to self-protect. And even though they don't express it, even though they don't verbalize it, something deep inside them shifts. Something inside them says, I'm not as okay without this person as I thought I was. When an avoidant realizes you've actually given up, not pretending, not threatening, not pulling away for attention, but genuinely done, something shifts inside them that they are completely unprepared for. And this shift doesn't show up the way you think it will. It doesn't show up as panic in the beginning. It doesn't show up as a grand apology. It doesn't show up as a sudden rush toward you. It shows up first as confusion. Genuine, disorienting confusion. Because avoidants spend their entire emotional lives believing one thing: you will always be there, no matter how distant they get, no matter how cold they become, no matter how long they disappear. They assume you will still be waiting, still open, still offering, still holding the door. And you know why? Because that's what always happens. The anxious partner, the overgiver, the emotionally available one in the relationship, you always go back. You always try again. You always reach out. But when you truly give up, when your heart checks out, when you stop being available in all the ways they subconsciously relied on, It sends them into an emotional state they don't have a map for. They don't know what to do because for the first time, the dynamic they thought was predictable is now unfamiliar. The roles have reversed, and their internal system goes, wait, something's wrong. Something just changed. They feel it before they understand it. This confusion begins with a disruption to their sense of control. Avoidance may not be controlling on the outside, but emotionally they rely heavily on predictability. Predictability equals safety. Predictability equals comfort. Predictability means they don't have to deal with their own vulnerability. And you were predictable. Your care, your effort, your patience, it built the emotional structure they leaned on, even when they pushed you away. So the moment they sense that the structure has shifted or disappeared, their internal balance cracks. Suddenly, the silence they once found peaceful feels unsettling. The space they once needed doesn't feel comfortable anymore. The distance they insisted on now feels too big, too unfamiliar, too cold, and that creates an internal friction they can't ignore. If you've ever noticed how avoidance gets strangely irritated, or unusually quiet, or oddly restless when they don't feel in control of the emotional dynamic, that's exactly what's happening here. The confusion begins as discomfort. They start checking for signs of you without realizing they're doing it. They check your status. They check your online habits. They hover in your stories. They notice things about your life that they didn't pay attention to before. They don't know they're searching for reassurance. They just feel compelled to look. They feel compelled to check. They feel compelled to see if the emotional door is still open. But when they see that it might not be, when they realize you're not reaching out, when they see you're not chasing anymore, that's when the confusion intensifies. They don't understand what changed. They don't understand why you're suddenly distant in a way that feels real. And avoidants do not handle uncertainty well. They avoid emotional intensity because they fear being overwhelmed, but being cut off from emotional safety, from predictability, from reassurance that overwhelms them even more. You want to know why? Because it forces them to feel. And avoidants are not comfortable in emotional territory. Their entire attachment system is built around managing overwhelm. They create space when they feel threatened. They detach when things get too real. They retreat when emotions rise. But now the emotion is coming from you, stepping away. And they don't know how to regulate that. They don't know how to soothe themselves when the loss feels like it's coming from the outside, not the inside. So they enter this strange phase where they intellectualize everything. Avoidants always try to think their way out of emotional discomfort. So they start analyzing the situation. They replay the last conversations. They revisit the last moments with you. They try to figure out what triggered your shift. And they ask themselves the question they tried to avoid for so long. Did I push too far? This is where confusion turns into doubt. They doubt their assumptions. They doubt their decisions. They doubt the choices they made that led to the disconnect. And avoidants hate doubt because doubt leads to vulnerability. Doubt leads to self-reflection. Doubt leads to the realization that maybe they actually cared more than they let themselves admit. And that's terrifying for them. So instead of reaching out, they watch you. They observe. They monitor. They're trying to understand your emotional state by collecting information. Instead of confronting their own, they'll analyze your tone in a post. They'll look at what you're liking, what you're sharing, what you're doing. They'll look for signs that maybe you're still emotionally open. Because as much as avoidants run from intimacy, they need connection. They need closeness. They just don't know how to hold it without feeling overwhelmed. And when they sense that you are no longer emotionally available, the world they built inside their head, that world where they could pull away and still feel safe because you were there, begins collapsing. That collapse feels like pressure. It feels like anxiety. It feels like something they can't quite name but can't escape either. So confusion becomes emotional friction. Friction becomes restlessness. Restlessness becomes fear. Not dramatic fear, not panic attack fear, but the quiet kind that sits in the chest and won't go away. It's the fear that says, what if I actually lose them? Avoidants aren't afraid of commitment. They're afraid of losing themselves, but losing you. That's a different kind of fear. Because losing you doesn't threaten their autonomy. It threatens their emotional stability. They don't fear the relationship. They fear the vulnerability inside themselves. But losing a connection that once felt safe, That hits the part of them they've spent their entire lives trying to avoid, the part that feels abandoned. When an avoidant realizes you're moving on, their avoidance no longer protects them. It exposes them. It forces them to confront emotions they've suppressed for years. And even though they hide it well, even though they pretend everything is normal, the confusion grows into something heavier, something they don't have the emotional tools to handle, something they can't rationalize away, something that feels like loss, even if they don't name it. You become the silent thought in the back of their mind, the question mark they can't erase, the story that didn't finish, the person whose absence suddenly feels louder than your presence ever did. They don't tell you this. They don't show it externally. They don't run to you with an apology. But every avoidant hits this moment. The moment when confusion cracks open the first layer of emotional realization. The moment when their system built on distance and self-protection suddenly registers that something is fundamentally different because you stopped fighting for them. And for the first time, they don't know what to do next. When an avoidant finally realizes you've given up, truly given up, they experience one of the most uncomfortable internal shifts they've ever felt. Here's what most people don't understand. Avoidants don't panic when you pull away.